second and welcome you all to the Creatures Great and Small exhibition here at Paint Creek Center for the Arts. It is our first exhibition for the year, so I'm very excited. I think some of our artists are also very excited, if not all of them. So we really appreciate you coming out and showing support for the wonderful people who have participated, and also Paint Creek as an organization. If this is your first time here, and I think I do see quite a few first-time faces, we are a 501c3 nonprofit art center, and we offer art education classes, exhibitions. There's an art market downstairs that is full of Michigan artists' work like Steve and Joy, who are also participating in the exhibition. And we're also the organizing group behind the Art in Apples Festival, which is our yearly fundraiser. Hopefully you all have been there at least twice. So I will just give the opportunity to these wonderful people who have volunteered so kindly to speak about their work. And then we'll just kind of go through some very basic questions from me, and we'll open it up to the floor at the end. So if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand and speak directly to the people here. So without further ado, we're going to start with Steve because you chose to sit closest to me.
I thought it would go that way, but that's all right. Hi, I'm Steve Chapieski, and I'm from Novi.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Sigrid Grace, and I'm from Rochester Hills.
And I'm Kim Santini, and I'm from Lake Orion.
Welcome, welcome. If I could please ask you to identify which pieces are yours in the exhibition, just so people know they see it on the wall to come and find you guys later.
Well, my two are right over there, next to Melinda, who didn't want to talk to anybody.
Okay.
Okay, and those are my deer over there under the pines. And then I have a Sheltie that's behind that. It looks like a little collie behind that partition part. And I have another buck that's jumping down the hill near the door.
And I have two equine pieces. I have this blue one here, and then and the other one is right behind me.
Could you guys speak a little bit about what it was like to create the pieces on display here? Paint Creek sees a lot of paintings and drawings and photography for our exhibition, but not necessarily digital artwork, or we have a lot of student work like Sigrid's. But you are a very established professional artist. I think your CV was going back to 2002, and I was reading a lot. It's 3 pages. So whoever would like to start, if you want to talk about what you did to make these pieces.
I want to hear about yours.
Well, I started out as a student many, many years ago. I've been drawing and painting my whole life, and about 20 years ago I decided to try and make a career out of it. So I've had a jump start on some of the people here just because I've been involved in it for so long.
Okay.
I guess. I'm very similar. I started as a conventional illustrator in the 90s and developed into a digital illustrator just as out of need of necessity for just working in the field. So I'm lucky that I'm able to parlay it into a finer art form as well.
Well, when I was a freshman in college, I took a class from each subject that I thought I'd like to be. And the one class I took there that was an art class, their style of art and my style of art didn't go together very well. So I went on and became a public school teacher. But now that I have retired from teaching, I can go back to being an artist as I want to be. So I'm in the Thursday morning painters class that's here at Paint Creek Center for the Arts.
Wonderful. And you also have some pieces as part of that group over at Rochester Hills City Hall, right?
Yes.
Yes. Very passionate. Okay. Well, I would like to start with you, Kimberly, if you could talk. I know something that was a large part of your submission pieces was your involvement with the Kentucky Derby. Mm-hmm. Could you speak a little bit about what that experience was like, either getting involved or creating the work for it?
Yeah, absolutely. I was the official artist of the 2015 Kentucky Derby, and the project was really serendipitous on a number of different levels. It's a commission project that the licensing agent facilitates, and the licensing agent is kind of a go-between between Churchill Downs and the board of directors and the marketing team that builds the brand for the Kentucky Derby. And essentially what happened was she Googled horse racing art, and I have been a daily painter since 2006, so I was creating a small pet portrait each day and posting that on my blog and sharing a little bit of a story about the animal. And I did a lot of horse racing and thoroughbred scenes because that was what I had access to at the time. And so I had a whole bunch of keywords already established on the internet. And when the powers that be did the Google search, my work showed up and they were able to follow back to my website and call me up. And I actually thought it was a prank phone call. You know, and I'm like, yeah, you're offering me the job of derby artist, and then I thought about it, and she started naming names, and I'm like, wait a minute, this could be legit. And I sat at my computer and Googled really quick while she was still on the phone, and I was like, hold on, Claire, can you please repeat yourself? So yeah, it was a commissioned project that I had about 5 months to complete and deliver the work to the racetrack, and then they created all of the materials from my artwork, so that the tickets to the event, the programs, and then there was all this merch like T-shirts and tea towels and wine glasses and coffee cups, and I mean it was rather overwhelming, all the stuff that went along with it, but it was a really great project.
I have some questions for Kim. I've been to the Kentucky Derby and I've been to Louisville quite a bit. So, did they have you painting there on site at Churchill Downs, or they didn't care about that?
They did not care about that. They wanted the artwork delivered ahead of time so that they could do all the promotional things that happened behind the scenes.
Okay.
They did invite me to come down to the Kentucky Derby Museum, and I was a keynote presenter at a gala that sort of kicked off Derby season in early April of the same year. And I also went down to the reveal party in November, where they reveal the artwork and what the imagery is going to look like for the coming year. But they didn't really have an interest in any sort of live painting events, which was good because that took some of the pressure off.
I've always wondered about that. Near the paddock where they saddle the horses, they have an artist in there painting. And what if you were painting and it was one of your worst works? That would be just
Isn't it
really
everybody's
devastating.
worst fear?
Yes.
I'm sure you guys have demoed in public or for groups, and yeah, you show up and you're like, if I don't get in my zone, you're done.
Right. And now you mentioned you paint every day.
Yes.
So Ellen Pendleton was one of the teachers who taught me in Kentucky, and was she a friend or a fellow teacher with you?
At the time that I first got to know Ellen, she was a teacher, and we were part of a online group called the Equine Art Guild.
Yeah.
And it was an international association of equine artists, and it was long before social media, so it was basically a forum for us to network using the internet without having to be physically in the same space. And that's how I first got to meet Ellen, and she was a daily painter.
Yes, she
And-
has been for years.
For those of you who aren't familiar with the concept of daily painting, it means you make a commitment to go into your studio and make art every day. And what Ellen was doing that was so inspiring was she was starting and finishing a painting every day. They may have just been small studies, but it's a big deal to show up with a concept and put your brushes to work and then walk away. And she was blogging and photographing and telling stories about her work, and I'd been following her online for about a year. And when I saw how her work was changing and growing and how quickly she was learning just because she was showing up and doing it, I said, hey, I want that learning experience too. So Ellen was a huge influence on my commitment to daily painting. And then ultimately we became friends
Good.
over the years. So
Well, she has the daily blog on the internet, and anyone can look at it. And I especially appreciate one picture she had that was really not very good. But she kept working on it. And then as she kept working on it through the days, it wasn't just a one-day painting. It got better and better, and it's just very encouraging to see that type of progress.
So speaking of progress, I know you started out as a graphic designer.
Yes.
How did you make the transition to illustrative, cartoony pinups?
Well, I was trained to be a conventional illustrator back in college, and I wasn't able to get work doing that because it was right at the time when conventional illustration was being phased out in favor of digital illustration. So my first job was working in what was then called desktop publishing, which was print production back in the good old days. And I worked with a team at my ad agency that developed logos and developed campaigns for clients. And we were pushed into doing more digital illustration. So I was handed Adobe Illustrator back in 1989 and said, learn it. And that was literally the thing. They said, learn it or you're fired. And that was what we had to do. So we figured it out, and it's a great program. It's kind of a companion to Photoshop, where Photoshop does pixels, Illustrator does vectors. The real power of illustration on the computer is with Adobe Illustrator. Photoshop is great, Illustrator is better. And working with Illustrator, you can get some really cool effects. But it lends itself to smooth and sharp edges and things of that nature. So, and then I like drawing girls. So.
So as a graphic designer myself who works marginally in Illustrator, I've seen you posting what are called wireframes.
Yes.
So I think there's a big difference between people who are using, like Procreate's really popular for the iPad right now for people drawing and painting. Illustrator in particular, creating vectors. If you want to talk about what wireframes are, because they're terrifying pictures when you post them.
Yeah. The actual illustrations that you see up there, they look simple, but there's a lot going on under the hood there. There are paths that are just points that make a shape, and you color those shapes and you pile them up on top of other shapes. You mask them with other shapes. You blend them. You blur them. You adjust colors, and eventually, before you know it, you've got thousands of these paths, one on top of the other. And they get ridiculously complicated, and my printer hates it when I hand them those files because they're gonna choke them. So I just hand them JPEG files now. It's just easier. But yeah, it's a bit of a learning curve. But once you got it, once you start working with it, it's awesome, and it's so smooth now. It doesn't even mean anything to me. My hands just do it.
Okay. If you get the chance, please find Steve after the talk and have him show you some of the wireframes he's posted. My brain is trying to use chicken wire as the closest visual representation of how it overlaps and looks. But I know that the picture will speak for itself when I say it's insane. And I don't know how you do that.
Lots of layers.
Lots of layers.
Patience.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Sigrid is painting in traditional oil and acrylic. Is it just acrylic now?
I've been doing mostly acrylic, yes. And all those years where I was teaching school and checking papers and having conferences and all of that, there wasn't time for me to paint. So I tried to surround myself with excellent art. And one picture that I always had on my wall was by Albrecht Dürer, who was an artist from the 1500s. And he talked about how you have a secret dream treasury in your heart. And as an artist, that's what you should be painting from. So for me, I try to paint the things that I see here in Rochester that hit that secret dream treasury. So my deer over there are what are in the backyard. They aren't all there together at the same time. And I take quick pictures of them and sort of put together this deer, that deer, and the other deer. And those trees are in my backyard too, but there's a lot of houses there as well. So it's sort of my own secret dream world, but it's based on the things that I really see and really know.
That's very cool.
I love the idea of a secret dream treasury,
Yeah,
and I
cool.
think any creative will know can relate to that, because that's what when we choose something to paint, that's where we go to where our passions are and what really makes us happy. So that's a wonderful point.
I feel like some of your pieces, especially from this collection here, kind of have, I don't want to say whimsical, but kind of that dreamy look to them. Would you say that you were trying to achieve that? Or-
Well, that's a great question. With these two pieces that are here in the show, they're part of a series that I call Echoes. And what I was trying to do was explore more deeply my own relationship with horses and animals in general, but the Echoes focused on horses in particular. And I've always loved them. I never really understood why, because I didn't grow up with them. I didn't have any family members who grew up with them. But they were always in my life, and they always seemed to find me. And so I wanted to understand that a little bit more. And I was working expressively and intuitively and allowing symbols or other objects to come into the painting if they just showed up during my painting session. And this one in particular is about my daughter and my grandmother and my mother and my great-grandmother, and sort of the lineage of the 5 of us, and how each one of us tried to raise a strong daughter and send her off into the world. And my daughter just went off to college in the fall. So I feel like that one really tells a story of family and resilience in generations.
That's really beautiful.
Nice.
So, Sigrid, you are painting realistically things that you see.
Yes.
One of your paintings is Smiling Sheltie. Can you talk about
Yes.
this cute little dog?
That's my dog.
Yeah.
Baron is a trained therapy dog, and so we go to school once a week and we read with children. Now, I say we, Baron always reads silently. He doesn't speak. But the picture of him is what he looks like when the children are coming up to him to read. He really enjoys this. He likes children. And he's known in the neighborhood as the smiling dog because he sort of has that look to him. So I have a painting of him that I did when he was on top of a hill guarding us. And sometimes he does that. But in this painting, he's welcoming the children to come see him.
The animals in your piece are also animals that you have had personally.
Yes.
Can you speak about those? Because you make a vague mention about a police officer intern.
Yeah. The cats are pretty much normal cats. They all do their usual cat thing, and as I've indicated on the piece with 3 cats, that's where they like to sit and pass gas on you. That was their thing. But the dog, my dog Kirby, he had some strange adventures, and he had a criminal record in Holly, and I was already planning on moving, but he committed some crimes against humanity, and the police officer came and said, "You know what? If I were you, I'd move." And I said, "Okay, I'll move." But I don't think TV would really appreciate the story. Come see me. I'll give you the gory
It
details.
was just a vague one line on
Yeah.
your statement, and I was like, let's see if you'll tell us. You guys have beautifully answered the questions that I have, and I don't want to completely pick your brains in case there are questions from the audience. So I would like to open it up if anybody would like to ask anything of the artists up here on the panel. Sure.
Steve, I've seen the painting or the prints that you have downstairs
Yes.
as well. They've been there for a couple of months or longer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really curious as to what's the story behind how you came up with the cute young lady that's the feature of all of these.
She's her name is Sally. My wife named her Sally, and she's kind of an amalgamation of girls I've had crushes on over the course of my life, starting with the little girl that, my little girlfriend from kindergarten, all the way up to, Raquel Welch was my first crush when I was a kid, and she's got a lot of Marlo Thomas in her, and a lot of other characters, but she's no one person. She's every girl.
Because she is the same person in
Pretty much.
Or most of the.
Pretty much. She changes a little bit. She has some attitude adjustments here and there, and, but she's pretty much the same gal throughout.
I should have asked you, or asked you to speak more about the number of pieces that you've made with this character, because I know you brought to Paint Creek 2 Valentine's Day series now, and I think there's several, one at least each year.
Yes.
How many pieces have you made with her?
That's a really good question.
Sorry for the stop.
Yeah, that's a good question. I really should make a count, but I would say it's got to be well over a couple hundred by now. She started appearing in event posters for burlesque shows and for art events and such, and then she started appearing in other things, and it just kind of went from there. But I've been drawing her for over 10 years now.
You have a book downstairs.
Yes, I do.
You recently released a coloring book.
Yeah. Yes,
So
I have a
I didn't
coloring
know
book
if you
too.
had a hard number in your head on how many you've done.
Nope.
Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up question
Sure.
related to the digital art?
Sure.
So once you have created her, do you have to recreate her every time, or is it?
Yes.
If
Yes.
you do.
I do not copy and paste. I draw everything from scratch every time. I sketch everything. I do everything by hand, and I use my sketches as my templates. And then I just go point by point by point and draw over and over again. The only thing that I'll use from one illustration maybe to the other are the palette of colors. That's the only thing I'll use.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Anyone else? Sure.
I actually had a question for you about how your process is. Do you start from realism and then go into abstraction? Do you start abstract and then go into realism?
That's a really good question. For those of you who couldn't hear, how do I start my pieces? Do I start representationally and step into the abstraction, or is the abstraction what I envision to begin with? I start with a representational object or form, and I use a process called spin drawing, where I'll draw, like, for example, if I have a Breyer horse model, I'll set the horse up and I'll light him on a pedestal and I'll draw him on my piece, and then I'll pick him up and I'll relocate him and I'll rotate my piece and I'll draw him again. And I continue that process over and over again until I feel like I have a really strong sense of how that horse's lines are. And what happens is I layer all these drawings together is that a main form emerges, and it isn't exactly what the model horse looks like, but it's close enough. It has like the essence of him, and then I'm able to further edit and play with it. The other thing that I do is I let my paints do their I don't try to micromanage my paints. I work really loose. I start with a really big brush and lots of water or medium in spray bottles, and I let my paint move. I don't try to force it to follow or stay in the lines at all. And that also helps me to get a more expressive end result. Great question.
I have kind of a follow-up on that one. How do you know when your pieces are done? I'm just curious, like, how
You don't ever really know when your pieces are done. I will personally
That's the truth.
stop working if I feel like I'm no longer making marks with intention, like I'm not trying to change or shift something. Sometimes you can get in the mode of painting and you just keep mixing paint and putting color down, and you have to be aware of when that happens and step back. But I also really believe that as long as I continue to own a piece, if it hasn't found a home yet, it's always a candidate for a rework.
I have a quick question for all of you, since you have all done consignment pieces or commission pieces, being that we have such a large art school here, what would you say your experience has been as far as portraying someone else's animal, their beloved pet, or a figure that they've maybe requested that you do? How do you guys typically start and begin that process once you've been commissioned? The looks of terror.
No.
I'm trying to think of the words here.
Yeah. For me, the first thing I want to do is start communicating with the client, because the one thing that I've learned is that you can have the best photos in the world, but if you don't understand why the client wants the painting or the piece of artwork to begin with, then you're never going to be able to give them what they want. So you have a conversation and you look at the photos, you hear stories about the animal that they want painted, you look at their eyes, you look at their body language, both your clients and the animals, and you find a common ground there. But you also have to really understand what it is you're painting. I could never do human portraiture because I don't know all the nuances of face like I know the body language of an animal. I'm much more comfortable with that, so it's easier for me to paint that. I think communication is the biggest part of a successful commission project.
And let me say also, in Kentucky, they taught us that you need to go see the real animal, if possible. There have been a few occasions when I thought I knew what they wanted, but then when I showed them the picture, I discovered there was something I didn't know about. So I painted a girl's horse for a Christmas present, so I couldn't talk to her. Her grandmother had commissioned it. It was a beautiful dark brown horse, and I painted it that color. And when I showed the grandmother, she said, "Oh, it's lovely, but my granddaughter's been feeding my horse special substances so it will turn black, could you possibly make the horse be more black? And so that's where you're kind of departing from reality, and you're having their imagination of how it's going to be. It did turn out like she liked it, but I did change the colors, and that caused me to accommodate what I was doing as an artist, and to realize that you're not always painting what you see, you're painting what they hope.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true.
And you're absolutely right. It just comes down to communication. And for me, in my day-to-day business, I'm being told what to do by my clients and what to draw. And you just have to either become a mind reader or just ask a lot of questions.
Right.
And even then, if you provide them with a couple of options, they'll pick the lousiest one. So only give your clients one option,
The one you like the most.
the one you like.
Yes, yes.
And if they say, well, I want to see others, sorry. Ran out of creative juice right here, boom, that's it.
Thank you all so much for coming and for supporting the creative juices that you see flowing through all of the work that we have here. We're so excited that that so many artists responded to our call for work, and that we're able to represent so many of them here today. I wanted to make a special announcement about a partnership that is actually being rolled out on Monday. So this is a sneak preview you're all getting. We are partnering with the Detroit Institute of Arts to create a work of public art here in Rochester, which is going to be unveiled this year in 2020, hopefully this fall, around the Art in Athens Festival, as a matter of fact. The first step in doing this is to try and get feedback from our community. We're going to have a survey that is online that's going to be available on our website starting on Monday. However, if any of you are interested in completing a paper survey, I'm going to have them at the back of the room. So if you'd like to pick one up and fill one out and leave it up there, we really love to have your input on that. So thank you once again for coming, and enjoy some more of the art. Yeah.